I'm Van Nguyen. Welcome to Full Story, where my guest is a much-noted Vietnamese-American aerospace scientist and educator, retired Professor Vinh Xuan Nguyen. Professor Vinh is a leader in the global Vietnamese community and has played a fundamental role in space exploration and technological development. At a young age, he attended the French Air Force Academy at Salon de Provence, where he specialised in aeronautical engineering. He graduated in 1954 at the nearby Air Marseille University in mathematics and was commissioned as an officer. In the following year, he qualified as a French Air Force multi-engine pilot. When Professor Vinh returned to Vietnam in 1957, he was appointed Chief of Staff in the South Vietnamese Air Force. And in the subsequent year, he became the commander of the Vietnam Air Force at the age of 28. He served as Air Force Commander until 1962, when he resigned and moved to the United States to pursue a scientific career. Professor Vinh has 2 PhDs under his belt. In 1965, he was the first recipient to be awarded the doctorate diploma on space science at the University of Colorado. And in 1972, he was awarded a national doctorate in mathematics by the University of Paris. Professor Vinh has given lectures and presented scientific reports numerous times, including at universities and seminars in the United States, Britain, France, and China. Adding to the impressive list of accomplishments, Professor Vinh has published a number of books and nearly 100 technical papers in mathematics, astrodynamics, and trajectory optimization. His novel titled Pilot's Life became a bestseller and winner of the 1961 Republic of Vietnam's National Presidential Literature Prize. Professor Vinh holds the 2007 Dirk Bauer Prize for Outstanding Lifetime Achievement in the field of space flight mechanics and astrodynamics. Professor Vinh, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you for joining me on Full Story.
Yeah. Thank you, Van. It's really a pleasure for me to be here on your show.
You were born in Vietnam's northern province of Yên Bái in 1930. Can you recall the time that you spent there growing up?
Well, I don't know if you realize that Yên Bái, although it's a small city between Hanoi and the Chinese border, but it's a historical city and very famous in Vietnam, because at that city that we have the first rebellion against the French dominion, and it's a record in the history of Vietnam as one of the most famous city on our struggle against the French protectorate in Vietnam. It's in 1930, the year I was born, that we have the first rebellion, Blood Dawn, and that. And just by coincidence, then it happened on February 7, 1930. That is exactly 1 month and 1 week after I was born. And I was told by my mother that as a baby, newborn baby, I was not crying, but somehow it's just influence on me that is something that really important that happened to our country. It's why for the past 85 years, I always think of the day where our country become really independent, free of the foreign influence.
We'll talk about your thoughts on the current regime later. I just want to go back to your interest in aerospace. When did that passion develop?
Well, when I was in junior high school, or in high school, really, I never dreamed of becoming an aerospace scientist later on. And first of all, not as a professor at the American University, because at that time I loved mathematics, and I had to study mathematics, and my dream at that time is just to become a college professor in mathematics. That is recently certainly live on in our education to become really a full-time professor. But when I finished high school, I was drafted into the army, And the only way to progress, to study further, is to go overseas. It's why I volunteered to take the exam of entrance into the French Air Force Academy in France. And while the Air Force Academy, I continued my study in mathematics and to get some kind of advanced degree in mathematics.
Speaking about the Army, you returned to Vietnam and you were the commander of the South Vietnamese Air Force for a time, from 1958 to 1962. Can you explain the level of responsibility you had?
Yes, it's really what I was trying to do, because I don't know if you know the education in France, especially in France we have three what you call a great military school. The École Polytechnique for the engineer, and it's the most famous one in France, something like the MIT in the United States. And then there's a École Saint-Cyr for the army officers, and then there's a École Naval for the Navy officers, and then there's the École de l'Air that for the French Air Force officers. So if you get into one of those four schools, then it just means that you continue to serve in the armed forces, and we have your future assured, because it's almost sure thing to become a commanding officer later on. But since I come from Vietnam after my education, 3 years education in France, after receiving my wings as officers and pilot, and at the same time engineering degree and mathematics degree, I have to return to Vietnam to serve in our armed forces. And because of my training at that time, I was made chief of staff of the Air Force. And 1 year after that, in 1958, I became the first Air Force commander of the Vietnamese Air Force.
What was that experience like?
Well, when I was appointed as first as chief of staff and later on as the Air Force commander, we really didn't have an Air Force, and Vietnamese Air Force. This is just a branch of the army. And in France, we call this the Air Force Bureau. It's just some kind of a branch of the army, and belongs to the army. So when I take over that so-called Air Force, I work for the American advisor and get a more modern aircraft, and then we just organize our administration and the Air Force base, the unit commander, and later on we submit to the president the organization of the Air Force, and then we have the whole organization as the Air Force. And then at that time my title became, instead of chief of the branch, Air Force branch, I became the Air Force commander.
Can we also talk about another relating to your piloting days? You've written many books, but there's one book that I really want to talk about, which is called Pilot's Life. It became a bestseller as well and led you to win the Republic of Vietnam's National Presidential Literature Prize. Can you tell me what inspired you to write the novel and what the literature itself is about? Yeah,
that's true. This is in Vietnamese. And if you check on the Google search engine, and you see that I have many publications in 4 languages. So that novel is in Vietnamese. I wrote when I was a very young pilot, and to tell the people about the life of a pilot. And I think that it's interesting because it has been reprinted many times, and it's read all over by the young Vietnamese, both the boy and the girl, because the boy loved to become a pilot, and then the girls love to have to know someone as a pilot. So it's very well-known novel. And it's now reprinted in the United States. I used the resource to support one of the fellowship that I have in the United States, a Vietnamese fellowship for the Vietnamese student.
You've received both the Excellence in Teaching and Excellence in Research awards, and you've produced many outstanding researchers and teachers. Is it a great feeling as a professor to know that your knowledge is being passed down for future generations?
I'm kind of lucky that I can tell you that many of my students formerly, especially that doctoral students, they are progressing very well, and many of them are now senior professor at American University or famous scientists all over the world. And they are mostly American and some of the people from China. And unfortunately, I don't have many Vietnamese students studied with me as a doctoral student. I have some of them as an engineer, but not progressing far enough to become a famous scientist. But many of my former American students now, they are very well known in the aerospace industry. And even I have one student, a female doctorate student, who is now in charge of designing the trajectory for the space administration to go to many planets, because that we have a special technique that we call the Aerospace. Gravity assist, that is, if light to go far away, sometimes we have to fly to a close planet and use the pull of that planet to spring it to far away planet. And she's the one who is in charge of those things. For example, that instead of sending a manned or unmanned spacecraft to Jupiter, and she had to fly it near Venus and use Venus as a springboard to send a spacecraft further far to Jupiter. And she's the one who is doing all that in Pasadena, California. And even now I have a former student, American student. He's a full professor at the University of Colorado. And he has his name named after an asteroid and bearing his name officially, because that, he studied motion around small planet, and when they discover new small planet, and they pick one to name after him. So it happened that we have all those things, but not many people know that they are my students.
You've lectured at numerous universities all around the world. Mm-hmm. Are you familiar with the higher education in Australia?
Oh yeah, that well, recently just to write an article about higher education in the United States, I just use Google and check out all the big universities in the United States. And first, I checked the name of the top 10 universities, and next top 25 universities, and then next top 50 universities. So I found that among the 25 universities, there's many students, many universities that I have taught in the United States, and especially the University of Michigan, where I spent 30 years there. And it's ranked now at 20 or 21st among the top 25 universities in the world. And you see the leader is that some of the universities in Great Britain, like Oxford or Cambridge, and university in the United States like Harvard or Johns Hopkins, and some of the we call public university like the university where I taught, that the University of Michigan, Virginia University, and fortunately that we also have good Australian university in the list. Well, there's just one in the top 25. That is the Australian National University in Canberra. And each list are the 24th and 25th. But if you extend the list a little bit to include all the 50 top university in the in the world, and we can rank the University of Melbourne here as the second university in Australia, and after that we have the University of Sydney and New South Wales, and also the University of Queensland. And at one time I was invited to come to Queensland University to give a lecture. So I do have some experience for Australian University.
We just talked about the wonderful achievements of your students, but can we just talk about your involvement with Aerospace? I know you're very well known amongst the Vietnamese community because of your work at NASA. You were part of a team that helped the Apollo spaceflight program to the moon in the 1960s. Can you explain what your role was?
Sometimes the news just get deformed a little bit, you know. Say for example that they never realize that basically I'm university professor. That is, my job is to teach the student to do the work for the industry. So sometimes they think that I teach the aerospace engineer so that I can do the aerospace engineering duty. But there's hundreds of thousands of people who work for the aerospace engineering. And there's only probably maybe about 1,000 people you can teach them to do the job. So basically what I'm doing is to do my research and teaching at the university. But it's the duty of American professor is just to pay for his own student, because it's very expensive. So if we like to retain your job as a professor, and you have to make extra money to pay for your own student so that they can continue to study, because it's very expensive. It costs a student, a graduate student, and can also for his family, maybe $60,000 a year to continue. So it's your job just to have to supplement them with something, and you have just to submit a proposal to the U.S. government, either to NASA or to the U.S. Air Force, some project that you can work with your student. So I receive those contract, that is so that I can use that money to pay for my student. So in return, when I have contract with NASA to work on some project, they may give me $2,000–3,000 for 2 years, and I have to work with my student and submit a report. And if the report is good, then the government will publish this and resell this to university, so they can get back some money to them, so they can pay me again. So that's the way that we work in the United States. So that I do have many contracts with the U.S. Air Force, with the NASA, and when they publish those publications, they think that I'm working for them, but actually I receive grant from them to work for some research. I don't have to come personally just to work there. But I do spend some months as a resident to work to get some industry experience. And it's my contribution. But you know, it's fun. At least I have some of my publication with the NASA report, you know, bring on the cover. And I get about a dozen of them. And you can have this in many libraries around the world. And furthermore, I have some of my books that also distribute around the world, so that it's why when people type my name on Google and so forth, and just check that the book published by Mr. So-and-so, and you have all that. And not only that, you have the title, and you have the list also, the library that your book is on the shelf. So sometimes for fun, I just use some of the search engine and type my name and the name of my book. And they will list, say, about 200 libraries where I can find my book. And because we have to input the location where we search. So they first list 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That closest university where I can find. For example, that one in California and type this, and they listed university 1, 2, 3, and Stanford, UCLA, the close by university. But the list is long, so I cannot search on the 200 university that I can find that book. So I go to the last one and click on that to see that what is the farthest university where I can find a book. And it's some of the university in Africa.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Because some of the Saudi Arabia university also, they have my book in that.
Oh, that's good.
But sometimes they say that the further one is 20,000 miles away. So far. You can try this in Google. But be sure to type my name in Vietnamese way. That is Nguyen Xuan Vinh. If we reverse that, then it will be someone else.
Have you gone back to Vietnam?
Well, it's something difficult to tell, because someone just asked, because of they know my stand against the communists. So someone just asked that, can I go to Vietnam now, and how they receive me or how they treat me. So it's very difficult, because I'm so well known as some anti-communist person. As I told you that I was born the day that, or the month, where we have the uprising for the nationalist party that's against the French. So now it's against the, some foreign influence, namely the communists. So I'm against the communists. So they may think that if I go to Vietnam, they may do something for me, but really, I don't know. If they may roll out the red carpet to receive me, just trying propaganda. So I decided not to go to Vietnam as long as they still have the oppression, the communist regime there. And the last time I visited Vietnam is in 1968. Just a few months after the overthrow of President Diem. And the military junta, the military government, at that time they invite me home just to ask my opinion about, the foreign opinion about the regime. And I told them frankly that we have to run an election. And you cannot just take the power and then run the country like that. It's why they decide after that they have the election and become the Second Republic of Vietnam, and with President Thieu, and at least it's allowed the United States government to recognize them and also. But I decided against joining them in the government because it's still a dictatorial regime. But we get good relation. I still have Vietnamese passport. Until 1973, I still have used my passport, my Vietnamese passport. And that renews every year by the Vietnamese embassy in Washington, D.C.
Do you think the communist regime will change?
No, yeah, definitely. Since 1973, then they realized that, the Vietnam was sold by the American, because they have accord with the Chinese communists, Mao Zedong, to sell Vietnam. So that in 1973, they decided that I used the U.S. the passport to travel. And 2 years later, as you know, that in 1975, we lost the country. But we lost the country because we no longer have the support of the official support of the government, because here they decide not to continue to support us for our fight against. We didn't have the ammunition, we didn't have the gasoline to fly the airplane, we didn't have even the salt, the bullet to fire. So that it is just open. And I know that's in 1973.
In an interview with The Voice of America in 1994, I'm not sure if you remember, but you said besides science, you have paid a particular interest in issues of maintaining national cultural tradition. Is this something that you've continued to believe?
Yeah, just like today, that every time I have a chance to talk on the TV or on a news broadcast or an interview, where hopefully I can carry my idea to a large audience, that I always advise the people or say that I strongly believe that in the good future of Vietnam, free of communism. And it's always the same. But later on, that I think that the best way to speed it up is that we have to organize. And I fully support the demonstration now in Vietnam, requesting, that less influence over the Chinese communists. Just before I trip here, I receive, I have the visit of some of the officials in Vietnam. Well, the Catholic, I don't want to just name a visitor because I'm afraid that he may have trouble with the communists. But they told us that now if we have a chance and we organize just to show our express our opposition to the influence of the Chinese. Yeah. And it's mostly Catholic. And I hope that it's spread out to the other religion. And my visitor also tell me that we may have some weakness in other religion, but he firmly believes that in the Catholic Church we really well organized and we stay on. But he told me also that the communists try to infiltrate some of the organization to disrupt them. And that's the truth. That's what they are doing always.
I just have one quick question about cultural identity. In your opinion, does the Vietnamese culture and tradition need to be preserved more, especially with Vietnamese people born overseas, because they have two cultures, in fact? Is it important to keep true to both cultures?
Well, in my own family, I allow my children just to pursue their own idea, but I do have some guidance for them. I told them that, remember that we come from a good country, and the Vietnamese people, basically they are always good, and industrial people, and not eager to study it. So I just let my children free to select the way that they like to progress, and then force them to become a medical doctor, a dentist to make more money. And even some of my own son, he rebelled. He said that, wow, we can make more money than in my way than a medical doctor, because a medical doctor, he has fixed salary, but you get into the business, we can make more. So it's not the way that we do, just develop our own way. So I respect them, and I can tell them that they're right, yeah. Because that my younger son, his first salary, it's just the same as my retired salary. So I spent 30 years to make some money, and then he make the first time he accept his job. So really, it's it may be true also in Australia, because that we are industrial people, and we have the same way that to progress.
Before we end the interview, I can't go past one of your awards. You've received many awards, but perhaps the most significant one, should I say, is the 2007 Dirk Brouwer Prize that you received from the American Astronautical Society. This was for outstanding lifetime achievement in the field of spaceflight mechanics and astrodynamics. What does that award mean to you?
Well, it's named after a scientist from the Netherlands, and Professor Dirk Brouwer. He came from Holland and to Yale University, where he gets his PhD, and where he's invited to stay as professor, and then he became the director of the department there. And his main contribution is that he used the old celestial mechanics, the motion of a planet, to apply to the new flight mechanics, the motion of spacecraft. Actually, this is the same, but there's a difference. So he promoted this, and people recognize his effort when we start to have the aerospace industry to teach the younger generation that how to move the spacecraft as we have calculated the planet to it before. So he wrote books, and then he recognized that, and so it's why the American Astronautical Society first they named one of the place on the moon after him, because they have the crater on the moon, many craters, so they keep naming them after the one friend or people that they respect. But he became more famous when they used his name to have an award, annual award, that they call Dirk Brouwer Award. But don't forget that he also teaches flight mechanics, but he's also an astronomer. So the American Astronomical Society also, they have one award named after him, but the one in flight mechanics is more famous, more popular. So when I get that award, there's someone who checked on the Google, and they checked the wrong place. I said, I don't see any his name on that, but if we check the American Astronautical Society, then I was given the award in 2006, and they gave me a award in 2007, yeah, because always they have the option award, presentation the year after, okay. So when I received to Arizona to receive that, I just tell them that I have some Vietnamese like to go along with me to attend the ceremony, so that I have some officers, one from the airborne, one from the Air Force, and to come. And the one who received me when I come to Arizona is the F-5 fighter pilot, and in my Air Force. And so 4 of us come and well received, and we have this, that option become, but it's for, I received in 2006. So now if you check this, and we can have the list, I stand is in 2016, and the award is just received once a year to one person.
Finally, I'd like to ask if you have any advice for Vietnamese born overseas.
Yeah, I have written many, I have one article in English, written in English, and I recognize the Vietnamese, the way that the Vietnamese is recognized in 3 letters, that the D letter. And D first is distinction, and devotion, and duty. Okay, the 3 Ds, and if we follow those 3 Ds, then we will be successful.
Professor Vinh, thank you so much for joining me, especially all the way from America. It was a great pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you, Van, and it's a pleasure for me too.